Coming to you from Southern California, this is Mindset, mental health news and information. I'm your host, James Curtis. On today's show, why did you stop loving mommy?
Right, yeah.
Ouch.
Well, again, this is really disguised as, well, if you could stop loving mommy or you could stop loving daddy, that means you could stop loving me.
I have a conversation with Kelli Lynn. She's the other voice you heard on that clip. Kelli Lynn wrote a blog on her site, transitionsdivorceprep.com. The name of her organization is Transitions Resource. And the article that she wrote on her blog, on her website, is entitled Preparing for Divorce, How to Tell the Kids. The process of getting divorced obviously has a lot of moving parts, all with their own separate challenge and hardship piled on top of the big decision to get divorced in the first place. And not the least among those difficult moving parts is how to tell the kids. That's today's topic. But first, this news from the Mindset Report. The Mindset Report available online at mindsetreport.com. The Mindset Report, your most comprehensive online source for mental health news. Today's Mindset Report is underwritten by Responsibility, a complete guide to bystander intervention by Alan Berkowitz, who is committed to the idea that the solution to health and social justice problems requires that we engage as bystanders. Responsibility is available online at lulu.com. Lulu is spelled L-U-L-U. If you like what we're doing here at Mindset, as always, log on to our website, mindsetshow.com. Go to the Support Us tab and shop our affiliate vendors. There you can find things ranging from electronics to vitamins. Our vitamin affiliate vendor, Sport Formula, wants you to try the product for free. It is a great product. I've used it for years. To get your free sample of Sport Formula, go to the mindsetshow.com page, click on the Support Us tab, and then click on the words, get your free sample of Sport Formula. You'll find those words just above the Sport Formula banner on the top right-hand side of that page. Purchases through our website help support our programming. This news from NPR, National Public Radio. At the recent White House Science Fair, some teenage girls were recognized for an app they created. Their Safe and Sound smartphone app is meant to help teens who are struggling with depression and anxiety. According to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, suicide is the third leading cause for young people, and this app is expected to be available on Android devices in June. From the newscientist.com, CogMed. It's a brain training program designed to improve how much verbal and visual information you can temporarily remember and work with. It's been showing promise for people who have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. The trial looked at children and adults with ADHD or those who might have problems with attentiveness. Combined results showed that CogMed, this program, reduced inattentiveness for at least 4 months after the training was completed. From Psychology Today, want to live longer? Make good friends. Good relationships have a potent beneficial impact on our health. Last week, we reported on the author and award-winning journalist Gabrielle Glazer's investigative report called The Irrationality of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, it seems that article, which appeared in The Atlantic, has caused quite a stir. I spoke to U.S. News and World Report's Kimberly Leonard about why that was. My guest is Kimberly Leonard, reporter for U.S. News and World Report. She wrote an article. Her article, Investigation Questions Effectiveness of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was brought about by an investigation, an article published in The Atlantic that really delves into the effectiveness, the efficacy, whether or not Alcoholics Anonymous is really all that we've made it to be as a society. Kimberly Leonard, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So Gabrielle Glaser, she did this investigative piece. She published her findings. It's come under a lot of controversy, a lot of heat. Give us the overall idea of what's going on behind this report and why it's such a hot topic right now.
Well, it has come into a lot of controversy, and I know that a lot of readers were upset by what they read. I think that there are different methods that work for different people, but this particular report that was published in The Atlantic called The Irrationality of Alcoholics Anonymous really delved into questions about the program, which doesn't track data, which doesn't track effectiveness, and looked at other forms of therapy that seem to work for people, whether it's cognitive behavioral therapy or whether it's medical intervention, such as particular medications that appear to work for some people.
So the idea that Gabrielle Glaser questions the main, the premise of the program is that we as a society, and when I say society, I mean that in the broadest sense of the term, from courts who have individuals who have alcohol-related offenses, they're told or mandated to go to Alcoholics Anonymous programs, to AA programs, therapeutic institutions, whether they be mental health organizations or others, send people to these and require that individuals go, as well as, the overall popularity in the public consciousness that Alcoholics Anonymous is the program, almost the only program in a lot of people's minds that there is that's available to deal with any sort of alcohol-related dependency.
That's right, and there's just going to be a lot more scrutiny on different programs that target behavioral health measures, meaning mental health and addiction services, because the Affordable Care Act provides more funding for treatment of those difficulties. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of these kinds of reports come out that just focus a lot more on what the most effective therapies are and how we should be investing our time and our resources.
Now, one of the things that stands out as this controversy has come up as a result of Gabrielle Glaser's article is a deafening silence from the folks at Alcoholics Anonymous. What do you make of that?
Well, I reached out to them for comment because I knew this would be a controversial article. My story came out because it was a big story that had been reported by The Atlantic, and then I also attended an event in which Glaser was speaking about her investigation. And I reached out to Alcoholics Anonymous, and they told me it's not their policy to comment on these kinds of investigations. And so I wrote that in my piece. There really wasn't much more that we could gain from this. A lot of individuals were telling me that they benefited from it, that they have friends who benefit from it. So it's just, but there isn't a comment from the organization as a whole.
Now, as a reporter, you've been in the news game for quite some time. You're a veteran reporter, award-winning journalist. What do you make of that? That seems a little odd, doesn't it?
Every organization has different policies when it comes to addressing these kinds of issues, and I think it's only fair for us to reach out for comment, and then if they choose not to comment, just to note that the effort was made. Other than that, that's really all that we can report back.
Give us an idea of when you use the term investigation and use the term investigation in your piece. We're not talking about a governmental inquiry. This is something simply that Gabrielle Glaser, as well as other individuals, some scientific organizations have researched. This is not sort of getting called to Capitol Hill and testifying for Congress kind of investigation, is it?
Well, not yet. No, what we mean by that is investigative reporting. And again, this is one experience. This is one finding from one investigative reporting. There are some medical practitioners who agree. There are some who do not. But it was compelling enough for me to report on it.
Does Gabrielle Glaser back up this investigative reporting that she's put out in The Atlantic with some hard numbers that stand up to scrutiny?
She has a lot of information in there about how various medications can help people recover and how therapies can do so as well. It's not the nature of Alcoholics Anonymous to track effectiveness rates, but for other approaches to therapy, it's part of their whole scientific method in which they would naturally check those things and see where people are coming out of this and whether they're getting better and to what extent it's helping people.
Anything else about what you found that you want to talk about?
Well, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more reports on the effects of alcohol abuse on our society. A recent report by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention was really surprising even to the investigators who worked there. It found that 6 people a day die of alcohol poisoning, but when people saw the report, they thought at first, okay, this is going to be among college students. That was not the case. The majority of people who die from alcohol poisoning are middle-aged white men, and that was very surprising to, I think, everyone who read the report. Kimberly Leonard, healthcare reporter for U.S. News and World Report.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
When we return, our main topic, preparing for divorce, how to tell the kids. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Mindset, Mental Health News and Information. I'm your host, James Curtis. We're talking about, on today's main topic, divorce. How do you tell the kids how, indeed, and when, and where, and what you need to do to be ready for that conversation, a conversation that will be perhaps, and is perhaps, if you've already done it, the most important conversation of your life.
My name is Kelli Lynn, and I'm the founder and creator of Transitions Resource, LLC, which is a not-for-profit family divorce consumer advocacy. We provide tools and resources from professionals that are serving the divorcing community, from attorneys to accountants to professional counselors. We gather all of these professional resources and we produce resources for the divorcing family, like a divorce prep workbook. We have a team of therapists that actually do workshop a workshop series that trains fellow therapists on how best to give therapy to divorcing families. That team of therapists has also helped us publish a divorce therapy program that therapists use either in a group or a one-on-one setting. And then that led to us opening up family divorce mediation centers. So it's been an accumulation of things, but honestly, we're a hub of information for any family that's considering divorce. The divorce prep workbook does not have any legal information in it. It talks about how to hire an attorney, but the material in the workbook applies to any and every state and every state law, divorce law, because it tells a family what they need to cover well before they hire an attorney. You know, what they need to gather financially, how to tell the kids, the options they have with the house. It even has worksheets in their financial worksheets that they can fill out that they can take to mediation to talk about financial issues. It's even got a sample a very comprehensive parenting plan, so and a family could look at what a custody agreement might look like, that sort of thing. It covers a lot of ground that spouses need to know before they engage in the divorce process and hire an attorney.
And we're going to get into how to talk to your kids about divorce. Before we drill down into that issue, in addition to a money savings, do you think that there's an emotional cost savings to doing it in the way that you have come up with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, when families hire attorneys to litigate, attorneys were born and raised through law school to litigate. That's what their job is, and so they intend to litigate. Personally, I don't believe that litigation has any role in the, let's just call the Gwyneth Paltrow term, conscious uncoupling. Even when there's high conflict, you know, one spouse wrongs another with infidelity, or there's an addiction that's destroying the family, or whatever the cause of the relationship is, the family is already wounded by the time that it gets to the point where it needs to pursue divorce. And if you engage in a high conflict, litigious process, it adds an additional layer of wounding on top of an already really truly broken heart. You know, the spouses are broken, the children are broken, and it adds another layer of irritation that many times, depending on how long and how litigious and how high conflict the legal battle is, could take years, if ever, to be recovered with those co-parenting skills later on. You know, typical sad story, very sad story. It took us 2 years to get divorced, and my husband he's the one that did introduce multiple layers of litigating. You know, wanted a guardian ad litem, wanted a forensic assessment, and that was simply because he really wanted to use the legal process to hurt my feelings, basically, and my wallet. But 13 months later, he passes away. And the sad thing is that all of the anger that was caused by this litigious process was never resolved. And you know what? He passed away. But I've met couples 10 years, 15 years down the road that still won't speak to their ex-spouse because of what happened during the divorce process. Now, I'm not saying that these same couples still have issues that were unresolved that were related to the breakdown of the marriage, you know. But if a family can address emotional with counselors and that sort of thing, the emotional issues that broke down the relationship, they have a much greater chance of co-parenting down the road. Let's be frank. I don't know, James, if you had children with your former ex-wife or not.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have 3.
Yeah, okay. I look at it this way. You're always going to be a family if you have children with your spouse. You're going to have grandkids together. You're going to have weddings. You're going to have, you know, religious ceremonies like bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, that sort of thing. And if you can't resolve those issues, you know, pretty quickly post-divorce. And I mean, it might take 2 years, you know, in therapy or whatever. But if you can't resolve those issues, that conflict between the two parents, you know, trickles down generationally with the kids and the grandkids and that sort of thing. And so our goal and our mission is to minimize the conflict when at all possible. And we work with high conflict, you know, spouses, but try to minimize it as much as possible so that they can co-parent down the road in a healthy co-parenting way.
Right. There's a way of getting through this process without using the mechanism of the process itself as a weapon.
Right. And, you know, these attorneys that are doing a great job of litigating for their client, you know, when their case is done and the divorce is settled and the judge has ruled, they walk away from that family, but they leave that family in absolute emotional devastation.
And sometimes financial devastation.
Right, right. And they don't realize that, or even if they do realize that, they did their job. You know what I'm saying? And they can't own that. They can't. So really,
well,
again,
and let me just interject real quick here. As a former attorney, I understand exactly what you're talking about. And as you pointed out a few moments ago, it's not an issue of fault with regard to the attorneys. They are indeed doing what they're trained to do. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's just not a good idea for families in the larger picture. Would you agree with that?
Right. I totally agree with that. You know, and the reason that we really are strong proponents of mediation versus litigation is, you know, when you're talking about a traditional family, and I mean, across America, the average family probably has assets less than $1 million. They might have a couple $100,000 in a best case scenario in like a 401k retirement account. Probably their home is the largest asset that they own, and then some savings and that sort of thing. And so I would say that the average family across America probably has assets around, you know, between $200,000 and maybe $800,000, you know, in their net worth, maybe even some debt that takes that net worth down a little bit. I'm not saying that I'm saying that a judge, you know, two spouses should be able to make their own decisions about how those assets are going to be distributed based on the law in their state, and how each parent can share custody of the child, to have the best relationship. And we can talk about that and just
down and make some decisions that are really in the overall best interest of the family.
Right. And when spouses have a say in how it's going to work, they usually, 99% of the time, will fulfill the obligation that they agreed to in mediation. You touched on, you know, mental illness. You touched on all of those issues. In our mediation centers, we prefer to use Georgia registered mediators that come from a therapy background. They're PhDs, they're LPCs. They have skills in communicating. They have skills in helping others learn to communicate. But they also, on the flip side of that, are very well equipped to set boundaries in a mediation environment so that if one of the spouses might have mental illness issues or addictions and the mediation is heading south because of those, being overrun with anger or raging or whatever, they have the skill and the ability to bring it either back on course or shut the mediation down for a future date. Does that make any sense?
Fantastic. And I think that's absolutely critical. If you're just tuning in, my guest is Kelli Lynn. She is the founder of Transitions, that's with an S, Transitions Resource. You can find her on the web at transitionsdivorceprep.com. And you're phenomenal. I'm really having a great time talking to you, Kelli.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and transition into the conversation that caught my attention as a result of your contact with a woman called Denise Houston. She's a licensed professional counselor, and she talked about how to talk to your kids about divorce. Tell us why you chose to post that, first of all. Why do you think that's such a big deal?
Well, I do think that the children's first impression of what divorce is going to be and how it's all going to play out is really important. You know, anytime we're going to deliver really important news to anybody, you have to think about what your approach is going to be. And it's really important in the long term for each child, in order to have a really healthy relationship with each parent, that the parents don't involve the children in adult issues, and that they make sure that the child doesn't own any responsibility in the divorce, because children, we know that children are very self-absorbed up until a certain age. I think it's into their 20s or something. And so it's very common for children to think that they did something that would cause their parents to get divorced. And so we talk in terms of the ways that you can tell children so that they won't own any responsibility in the breakdown between the parents' relationship.
And talk about some of those ways. Yeah,
she said, you know, so the most important thing is that the parents, and they probably can practice this in advance, either together or in a therapist's office if they would like to, a child therapist's office, and they kind of get a script, so to speak. And I've always recommended that because it's an awkward conversation to have, and you want to do it right because you're only going to do it once, you know what I mean? So, number one, the parents should tell the children together if they can do so without any blaming, shaming, you know, any volatility, you know, or defending themselves. And again, a child therapist can actually coach a couple on how to do this the best way. But they use such statements as, you know, we've decided that we're just going to get along better if we live in separate houses. You know, we're not divorcing you. We're just divorcing each other. We still both love you, and we'll both spend time with you, and it's not your fault. And we're going to try to keep things the same as much as we possibly can, like the school that you go to and the neighborhood that we live in and your friends and all that. So we're going to try to minimize the impact that it has on you. I do think it's important, too, that when parents have this conversation, that they be prepared for specific questions, because kids ask very common questions that are self-related. And if they have an answer for them, it'll be really helpful, and the conversation will go a lot smoother.
Sure, I could imagine. Give us some of those.
Well, timing is very important. Number one, you don't want to tell them 9 months before you settle your divorce. You really kind of want to have everything kind of established, or at least an action plan prepared in place before you tell them. I distinctly remember when I was 16 years old, my parents came and told me and my siblings that they were getting divorced, and then they stayed married and lived in the same house for like 10 months before one of them moved out of the house, and it was very confusing to us. And we were teenagers at the time. I can imagine how confusing that would have been to, say, a 3 or a 4 or an 8-year-old, you know. It's important to tell them no more than about 2 weeks before one of the parents moves out of the home.
That soon?
That's what they say. Yes.
Really?
Children can actually absorb change much quicker than we think that they can, and much quicker than adults can.
Wow.
If you can believe that. Yeah. You have to remember that their mind is a sponge, and, you know, it's just, you know, anything new and different, you know, and they're accustomed to, especially in this day and age with technology and accessibility and that sort of thing. 2 weeks is a lifetime to kids, you know.
So what about the idea, and I know you're not a trained therapist, but certainly you've done work in this area long enough to have a sense of this and to have talked to individuals who are expert in this area, that is the psychology and the dynamics with kids. what kind of response would you get, or how would you reply to a parent who would say, that's just kind of abrupt? It seems like that would be too jarring for my kid. 2 weeks or a week.
If you tell them too soon, James, and that time period takes place kind of like what happened in my personal story, that gives children false hope of the parents changing their mind, or perhaps a reconciliation and that sort of thing, and it can just really be confusing for the children. Now, again, this is what the experts have recommended, and I just take their word for it because they work in that field on a regular basis. Maybe a month. In other words, don't do it 10 months before or 6 months before.
Okay.
And they'll have a lot of questions about that sort of thing. Like, as an example, where is the parent who's moving out of the home going to go? And you'll want to know that. You'll want to be able to say, well, mommy's moving into a townhome 3 miles away. She'll be close if you need to call her. Or, daddy's moving into an apartment that happens to be on your bus route. So on the days that you go visit him, you'll just go home to his house. I mean, you'll want to have some of those questions to be able to answer them. And the more answers that you have for their questions, the less unsettling the conversation will be for them. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. So the idea then of having this conversation in close proximity, that is shortly before, say, a month, 3 to 4 weeks, in a 3 to 4 week time frame, is really supported by the idea that you're going to get a lot of questions. So you really want to have the details ironed out and in place so you can respond appropriately.
Right. Where will I live is one of the biggest questions. They need to know, where am I going to live when I'm with daddy or when I'm with mommy if I'm not going to be here in the family house? Because, again, remember, they're very it's all about their world, and all the questions that you'll get from them will usually be, how is this going to change my world? Like, am I getting a new mom or a new dad? Well, no. Parents are not replaceable, Your mother is always going to be your mother, and your father will always be your father. And maybe somewhere down the road, daddy might find someone he wants to marry, and or mommy might find someone she wants to marry. And guess what? You get a bonus parent.
And I love that. I love that concept.
Dad.
I love that concept. I've started using that, as a matter of fact.
It's so
the whole idea of bonus mom and bonus dad, it's like you're not getting deprived, you're getting more. It's so cool. I mean, I like it. I mean, I'm sure the kids may like it too, but I personally like it better.
Yeah, and the thing is, how lucky can a kid be to have two moms and one dad, or two moms and two dads? I mean, won't that be amazing when you have 4 people loving you, not just 2, So, I mean, honestly, the way that you posture it and the way you position it is really going to make on how they're going to handle the major changes that are going to take place in their life,
Yes, indeed. Now, one of the tough questions that's in this article, which has got to be certainly one of those heart-wrenching things, why did you stop loving mommy?
Right, yeah.
Ouch.
Well, again, this is really disguised as, well, if you could stop loving mommy or you could stop loving daddy, that means you could stop loving me.
Yeah.
That's really what that question is saying. And so what you want to say to them is, mommy's and daddy's relationship is changing, but mommy loves you and will always love you, and mommy will never, ever, ever stop loving you, and daddy loves you, will always love you, and daddy will never, never stop loving you. And honestly, if the two parents, if there's contention between the two parents and they can't have this conversation with the child, if one parent does it the same way I just said it, the delivery is the same.
And along that line, the other question in the article, will you ever get back together? You have to resist the temptation, especially if this divorce thing is still simmering and fresh. Even though you've gotten to the point to be able to have this discussion, you probably want to resist the temptation of saying, no, I would never, ever live with that woman if she was the last person on earth. You kind of want to probably stay away from stuff like that. In other words, you need to have your emotions in check. I was being tongue-in-cheek about that, but it really underscores the idea that you really have to have your emotions in check when you have this conversation with your kids.
Exactly. Exactly, because kids know that their DNA is half mom and half dad, and if one of their parents is demonized through adult issues, through the divorce, then they feel like half of their DNA is tainted. They really do personalize that. And it's really important, and it's very hard. Listen, I'll be the first one to admit it, and I'm sure I had a couple errors early on, but it is really hard to bite your tongue and not want to spout off the issues, the adult relational issues that are causing it. But again, the kids are, they want to know, is there a chance that you could get back together because the family's changing? And again, I love this explanation. The family will never cease being a family. It's just structured differently. We will always be a family. Mommy and daddy are just going to live in different houses, but we will always be a family. We'll just be a different structure of family.
And that touches on the other question in the article: why did you break up our family? Talking about or bringing up the issue of how much adult detail do you go into with kids about what happened?
Well, you don't, because again, that's an adult issue. It's not, if the child says to one parent or the other, why did you break up our family? It's the other parent's responsibility to say, this is something we decided to do together. If the child's asking both parents, why are you breaking up our family? Again, you go back to, we've decided, you maybe watched us argue or you've sensed some hostility, and we've decided that in order to have a healthy environment for you, a loving environment for you, that it's best for each of us to live in different places. And it's, just keep going back to that. We've decided this together, and we've decided that we'll be better parents for you if we're not in the same house. That's simple.
As this is difficult stuff. This is hard stuff. Even for those who might think, I'm good at this. I'm balanced. I understand me, and I've dealt with the issue sufficiently. It sounds like even if you're pretty confident about undertaking this conversation, it's probably a good idea not only to practice, but to get some input from a mental health professional, somebody who knows and understands what this dynamic is.
I couldn't agree more. We got to look at it this way. This is just not a typical conversation that you're having with your kids when you're driving in the car and they're in the back seat on the way to soccer. This is a conversation that is a life-changing conversation that you're going to have with your kids. It's going to be one of the most important conversations you'll ever have with them in your life and in their life, okay? Because it's life-changing. The way that you handle it is really important. I consider this conversation kind of like a presentation. You want to do your homework. You want to practice your presentation. You want to practice your delivery. Practice it in front of somebody who can listen to it as a third party and say, oh, I wouldn't say that, but yeah, that was good. That's good. Say that. And that's what child family therapists can do. You can sit down for one, $85 session, best $85 you ever spent as far as the kids handling your divorce from that point forward. So I strongly recommend that couples that really want to put the kids first, and we should. I mean, we don't always, but we really should always try to think of putting the kids first. Take the time to find a child psychologist or a family therapist that specializes in children, and just have them help you do a dry run of this conversation and practice it, and have them coach you on your delivery. I think it will make a world of difference. I really do.
It certainly sounds like it. My guest is Kelli Lynn. She is the founder of Transitions Resource. You can find her on the web at Transitions, that's with an S, transitionsdivorceprep.com, and that's Lynn, Linn. Is that right, Kelli?
Yes. Thank you very much.
All right. Now, let's talk about...
One of the other questions... Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. One of the other questions was, that they have is, do I have to go to mom's or dad's? I know sometimes when kids get into the teenage years, they're just busy socially, and they're not really interested in really spending that much time with the moms and dads. And I just want to throw a little something in there, and something that I experienced.
Sure.
My family had a very traditional role. My husband was the breadwinner. We had both agreed after our second child came along that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, and I had been a stay-at-home mom for 12 years, and I was the primary caregiver, no question about it. And so his best time with the kids was a little bit of weekend time or after he got home from work. So, the assumption is, well, since I'm the primary caregiver, I would get primary custody because I knew how to care for the kids. Not so fast, okay? What ends up happening when you have a shared parenting plan, and again, I want to qualify this, as long as it is safe, with no threat of abuse from either parent, it's important to work together to have each parent have equal time to parent these children. I have seen traditional dad roles like my ex-husband turn into the most amazing fathers when they have custody of their kids during their parenting time. They work when they're not with their kids, and they stop and they go see movies with their kids, and they go to their sporting events with their kids when it's their custodial time. They play games. They do puzzles. They talk to their kids. Things they hadn't done before, because in the past they were focused on being the breadwinner and they knew mom had it covered, or vice versa if dad's the stay-at-home parent and mom is the breadwinner. So I just want to throw that out there and say, I think a lot of families are pleasantly surprised at how great the non-primary parent becomes a parent post-divorce. It's pretty phenomenal, actually.
Kelli Lynn, Transitions Resource. You may have noticed a break in the interview, my interview with Kelli Lynn. I had to do that on account of running out of time. If you want to hear what you missed, check out the podcast. It should be uploaded by this time tomorrow. That is today's show. My thanks to my guest, Kimberly Leonard, health reporter with U.S. News and World Report. Kelli Lynn, Transitions Resource on the web at transitionsdivorceprep.com. Until next week, for Mindset, Mental Health News, and Information, I'm your host, James Curtis. Dare to see mental health differently, because when we understand why we do what we do, we can all do better. See you next week.